Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Quick recap for what happened last time. What do we remember? Go ahead.
We were talking about war, preparing war with Veii.
Preparing for war with Veii, so that's been the big build going. We knew that war with Veii was coming. The 20-year treaty, I think it was, finally expired. And so Rome instantly jumps on the chance to go to war with Veii, and we've started our war with Veii. And then there's a particularly important event that happened with fighting the Volsci last time. And it's this city right here. The Romans got the city of Anxur last time. This is of crucial importance. I don't know how well you can see the different layers that this is trying to show you in terms of elevation, but this is one of your only real feasible paths coming from over here to over here. Otherwise, you got to come clear around these mountains. And so controlling Anxur completely shuts down back and forth for the Volsci. It almost splits them in half. And so this is of huge importance to the Romans. The other thing is Anxur turned out to be far, far wealthier than they anticipated, probably because of how much trade has to go through there. And so with the money from Anxur, one of the things they started doing is paying their soldiers a salary. So that happened at Anxur, and then we started our war with Veii. Our war with Veii, since we were paying soldiers a salary, they decided to keep a year-round army besieging the city. This is just some artist's attempt at reconstructing the city. But the point is, Veii is just insanely well defended. And on top of that, they were extremely prepared for a drawn-out siege with Rome. And so them up inside their city, Rome besieging them, if they're going to basically starve them out, the only way to do it is to besiege them 24/7, never light up. And so the other thing that the Romans started doing when they besieged Veii is to start maintaining a year-round army. Prior to that, or in most places of the world at this time, you just have your military campaigning season, which is basically your summer months. Spring, you plant your crops. Summer, you go fight. Fall, you come back and harvest your crops. And then no one does anything in winter. So now they're maintaining year-round a siege on Veii. And that's what they decide to do to finally, in hopes of making any progress on them. Now, the tribune of the plebs hate what's going on at Veii. Why do they hate besieging Veii year-round?
Because they can't make any political moves
Well,
without
the
the armies out.
Right.
Yeah,
Remember what assembly passes the laws. It's the assembly by century. It's your army that passes laws. If your army's out and gone, you can't pass any laws. And so you can push all the legislation you want, but it's hard to really get anything done. The Senate, or the people who have power outside of Rome, would basically have to agree to bring back an army for the purposes of voting. And the patricians are typically the ones all leading the armies. They have no incentive to do that. And so the patricians absolutely hate what's going, or not the patricians, the plebs hate what's going on right now. Inside of Rome, the power pendulum has very much now swinging in favor of the patricians. Now they are largely calling the shots back at Rome. So we're going to have our army constantly besieging Veii, and back in Rome, patricians are the ones kind of retaking power again, in control of things. Any questions about our recap before we continue with new material? Okay, so back at Veii, wherever the city is, I'll do it as a square. I think I've been doing that for cities. Back at Veii, wherever it is, it's now being besieged 24/7 year-round. And back at home, the last thing we talked about were the tribune of the plebs trying to work at people and outrage about what's going on. And Appius Claudius got up and explained, there's kind of no other way to do this. The people of Rome voted to go to war against Veii. The only way we actually stand a chance is if we maintain this siege year-round. If you don't like that, then we shouldn't have gone to war with Veii. Like, we can't do this. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, let's win Veii, but I want the army back half the year. So just not going to work. So armies out there, they just had that speech back at Rome. Now, during our winter time, the people in Veii, they're not just sitting idly by, letting Rome construct these defenses around Veii. Now, Rome's constructing defenses around Veii, and then they're also constructing defenses to the north. in case other Etruscans decide to show up. So the Romans are sandwiched between some defenses to the north and some defenses around Veii. And that's where the Romans are stationed. Now Veii, as Rome is constructing these fortifications around Veii, they're occasionally sending out troops to, disturb it, try and burn some stuff down, just interrupt the construction however you can. And what they were doing is kind of doing it in a controlled way. They kept intentionally hitting certain parts of the Roman defenses, and there were other parts that they intentionally left completely alone. And the parts that they intentionally left completely alone, one night, they snuck a bunch of people out of the city with a bunch of material that they could use to create fires, lit a bunch of their torches, and just ran and focused on just that area. Once they were able to burn through and get behind those walls, you can kind of get access to wherever they're constructing their siege equipment or whatever. And so there's one night where the Vaeatians. So there was one night where the Vaeatians were able to go to a part that they hadn't really gone before, burn through really quick, break through, burn a bunch of the stuff, capture a bunch of the Roman workers that were working on it, and then get back into their city, because the Romans kind of have to focus on putting out the fires. And that's their main focus. And so it sets the Romans back massively, once again, destroying a bunch of their fortifications and a bunch of whatever siege equipment they would have been building at the time. And so word of that gets back to Rome that there was just this major setback. This is going to be a setback in the wintertime, I think. How does Rome respond? They actually have a very patriotic response to this when they get word back. So the first thing that happens is a bunch of men of the equestrian class. Now your equestrian class, these are your, I was going to say first class citizen, but technically first class is under your equestrians. It's your equestrians, then your first class. These are the guys who are so wealthy they qualify to be cavalry. Now up until now, when cavalry was needed for the army, it was equestrians who would be your cavalry, but the state was responsible for actually supplying the horse. So you have to pay for and maintain the horse, but the state provided the horse for you to use. And so a bunch of men of the equestrian class, they volunteer to go help with this war effort now, and they volunteer using their own horses. They're going to pay for their own horses. Big deal at the time. Very expensive things to potentially lose in a battle. And so they go and they swear that they will go and help in this fight until the battle is won, and that they will serve as volunteers, also volunteering their own horses. A bunch of plebs, seeing that, they decide to follow suit. And so they also go and volunteer to help renew this war effort. And so they volunteer as infantry to go help in the war effort.
What does that mean, volunteer? They're not getting paid?
No, it means that they weren't levied.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because when you levy, it's not everyone who's required to serve. I think in practice, I could be way off with my numbers here, but I think in practice it's something like there's 30 tribes, and they pick 10 tribes each time that have to supply the troops. I think it's something like that. But some portion of the population only is required to participate each campaigning season, not the entire population. And so, them volunteering means they're going to go even though it wasn't their turn to go. And they also get the same oath. They're not just agreeing to go for a year. They're agreeing to go until this war is won. Whatever that means. And so a good amount of equestrians sign up for the war until the war is won, and a good amount of volunteers sign up for the war until the war is won.
Why would they do that?
Patriotic response. They're outraged by what has happened at Veii and the setback at Veii.
Is the army struggling to keep Veii enclosed?
They obviously didn't contain whatever it was that just barely burned back the fortifications.
Yeah.
So it's in response to this disaster, which is seen as a disaster. This is a huge setback. We just lost months of work. It's in response to this disaster that all these guys are responding. Now, they're volunteers. It does not mean that they are not getting paid. So once they pledge themselves to fight, and fight until Veii's taken, if you're a soldier for Rome, you're now going to get paid. So they also have to be paid. And so what does that mean? That means that more taxes are going to have to be collected to pay even more soldiers. The bigger your military is, the more you're going to have to tax the citizens, or the more pay you got to find from somewhere. Every time you pull one more Roman away towards the war, that's one more field that's not being plowed, or whatever. And so the money's got to come from somewhere. And so this huge, I don't know numbers, but a good amount of Roman people end up showing up to help with the defenses and quickly getting them restored. The people back at Rome contribute as much resources as they can towards the war effort. Basically, donating materials, donating whatever they can to hurry up and help with the war effort. And so with all that, while the siege equipment is lost, a bunch of the defensive works that they had for encapsulating Veii are quickly restored. Because if you can't at least encapsulate them, the siege is pretty much worthless. It's pretty much trying to starve them out. That's typically the name of the game. Any questions with that so far? Now, disaster also struck. So that, I think, was in the winter. Now we're back to springtime, back to campaigning season, so maybe into summer. Back in Anxur, that's that Volscian city, clear down south.
All the gold ones.
Anxur, they're not keeping a huge army there. They're just keeping enough soldiers there to kind of maintain the city. Just enough to hang on to it. Makes like someone else wouldn't try taking it, and then if you need to, you can resupply the city. So enough guys to hang on in case it ever was besieged, before help could come. The problem is, Anxur is just ridiculously far away. Here's Anxur, here's Rome. Ridiculously far away compared to all the other places that they're trying to maintain. And so what ends up happening is, during an exchange of personnel, when some people are, their time of service is over and going back, and some other guys are supposed to be showing up, there's a delay there. And so while some guys are leaving and some guys are showing up, there's an unusually small amount of people in the city. And now, because the city is such a trade hub, you have Volscian traders constantly coming through the city just all the time. You're not going to shut down all the business of the city. What ends up happening is a bunch of traders, as in they actually trade, not that kind of trader, but you can think of it that way too.
Yeah.
Bunch of Volscian traders inside the city during that opportune time are able to overthrow the garrison there really quickly. And with that, the city is able to quickly fall back into Volscian hands. So, starting the next campaigning season, Rome quickly loses Anxur without much of a fight, just because they didn't have enough troops stationed there. That's largely what it came down to. So our next year, military tribunes still being elected. We've been doing military tribunes over and over and over again because just way too much fighting going on. Way too many fronts to fight on. So we're going to be seeing military tribunes every time, not consuls. It's going to be a while before we see consuls again. I think it's 15 straight years of military tribunes. And no one's even fighting about it back in Rome. But so once again, military tribunes are elected. I think this time it was 6 of them. And the Romans have another problem now, which is Faleri up here and Capena decide to join their sister city against the Romans. So 2 Etruscan cities decide to join Veii against the Romans and to help with the siege. They're terrified that Rome taking Veii, they're kind of next on the hit list. And they don't want to see Rome's continual expansion north. So they figure our best chance to stop any northward expansion is here at Veii. Now, neither of these are the 12 Etruscan cities. Veii is one of the 12 Etruscan cities. This is a big deal city. These are smaller cities. But still, they're now joining the war effort on the side of Veii. And so now Rome's got some Etruscans jumping into the mix. Oh, it's back this way. And so what ends up happening is actually around the fortifications at Veii. So if we try and draw a little bit of a useful picture. So we got Veii, we're going to have some sort of Rome's defenses around Veii, and then we're going to have their northern defenses. Now it's not like all the army at Veii comes under one military tribune. And so one military tribune, he has his camp of his Roman soldiers, and he's going to actually have a camp inside the fortifications. And some other tribune, he's got his camp over here inside of the fortifications, some Roman camp. And so when Faleri and Capena decide to join the war effort, they don't send word to Rome, hey, we're joining the war effort against you guys, make sure you're ready. They just show up with their armies and come attack. And so they come and they attack on some side. I'll pretend it's this side. So we got the soldiers from Faleri and the soldiers from Capena. and they come and they attack one part of the fortifications. Since it's this part of the fortifications that gets attacked, it's this military tribune's job to take care of it. He's responsible for this piece. He's responsible for this piece. He's not responsible for that piece. Now, the military tribune here, the Roman military tribune here, if he sends and asks for help, then if this guy comes and helps him, he's going to get all the glory for any victory won. So he sent his troops out to go out and, they're fighting here and they're fighting here to hold them off, but he refuses to ask the other military tribune for help. The Venetians, seeing what's going on here, they say, nice, we're breaking through. So they also attack this side. This guy says, not my problem. It's over there. If he ends up losing, it just makes him look worse. Doesn't make me look bad. And on top of that, even though he sees what's going on, since this guy refuses to ask for help, he refuses to respond in any way. He's just being absolutely petty about all this. And what ends up happening is they get completely overrun in this part. When it's clear that the Romans are losing, the military tribune ups and books it all the way back to Rome. Just abandons it altogether. This guy holds on his part, maybe he puts some defenses up, I don't know, we don't have that much detail. But the point is, all the Roman works on this side are now just obliterated. The city of Veii is able to be resupplied, any siege equipment being built is completely destroyed, and it's almost like a huge reset on this entire war effort. When he gets back to Rome, he's quickly saying, you're going to get word of this disaster, and it's because this jerk couldn't come help me. He's going to turn the blame on the other guy as quickly as he can. So the second one military tribune shows up with a good chunk of the army, the first thing the Senate does is it says, where's the other guy? And they recall the other guy back to the city of Rome to try and picture together what's going on here. And then they get the picture together. One guy was too stubborn to ask for help. One guy was too stubborn to provide the help when he saw it was obviously needed. And so they end up telling the military tribunes, we're going to have you step down. You don't get to finish out your term. And we're going to immediately elect new military tribunes. Now, it's not like the Senate has the power to tell you that you're no longer a military tribune. Remember, the Senate is the most powerful organization with no formal powers. They just say this is what you should do and expect people to fall in line. Well, the two military tribunes who started all this, they say absolutely not. You can't just tell us to step down. You don't get to decide. We're going to keep going until our term's up. Now, the tribune of the plebs. Keep in mind, back at Rome, things are going the patrician way. Tribune of the plebs, they see an opportunity here. We will step in on the side of the Senate, saying that we require you, military tribunes, to step down, or we are going to jail you, in some way punish you. Now, the military tribune, whose job was to be back at Rome, remember that there's 6 of them, one's always going to be back at Rome. The one who is required to be back at Rome finally steps in. First thing he says is, you tribune of the plebs, shut your mouth. You're the tribune of the plebs. This is patrician business. And if you want to stay in the Senate, you're going to have to behave, essentially. Publicly spanking them in front of the Senate. And then he turns to his colleagues, and he says, I've been waiting for you guys to do the right thing. Obviously, we answer to the Senate. And so, obviously, we're all going to step down and do what they're telling us to do. Now, you can keep refusing, and if you do, I'm going to appoint a dictator. Now remember, any military tribune can appoint a dictator, but the Senate has to ratify it. So I'll appoint a dictator. You think they're going to say no? And then you'll be humiliated by a dictator forcing you to do what you know you should do. So save yourself the humiliation, do the honorable thing, and willingly step down, because that's the will of the Senate. And that's who we answer to. And that seems to get through to him. And so they step down after that huge disaster and immediately elect new military tribunes. Now understand, all of them step down together.
Why?
It wasn't just the 2.
Why would
Just the logistics of how it works. You elect these guys for that period. So, no special election just to replace 2. There's a lot more group guilt and group reward type thinking in Rome than there is in America. And so it is this set of military tribunes has failed us so badly that we're going to cut them short. So it's an embarrassment for all of them that had to come to this.
also fit their structure better? It's not make sense.
And so yeah, they end up electing new military tribunes, and those new military tribunes are going to serve a couple extra months. They're going to finish off the first term and then get their own term after that. So big disaster back at Veii, big reset back at Veii. And we're getting a new set of military tribunes for early, before the year's actually up. Okay, any questions with that before we continue our
So
story?
the military tribunes have been kind of at each other's competition multiple times through this, which is not very like group thinking,
Almost all of
like
us.
you're describing. It seems very individual.
Right, there is still,
Punishment.
it's not that there isn't an individual element to it. It's just that it's more of a group element than what we would think as Americans. So they're not Asian group, but they're not American individualistic. Let me try and give, it's a little bit different, but it's kind of the same idea. A very common thing for you to do if you want to be elected as a military tribune is to talk about how good of a leader your father, your grandfather, and your great-grandfather were. Because somehow their success is your success, and your success is their success. And their failure, your failure. And so, in a way, kind of a similar type
But
of
they're
thing.
not seeing that with each other whatsoever, in the way you describe
Well,
it.
they're also
Yeah.
super ambitious. And they know, well, yeah, while we did well, I'm the one who won it, and we all know it.
Yeah.
So, there's both elements.
Yeah.
I think it, like for instance, if we were to have two presidents in America, generally you have the Democrats deciding on one president and the Republicans deciding on another president, and they would have very strong different views, but one set of people would vote for what they want, and another set would vote for what they want.
Yeah, and that kind of does end up happening when you get later to the consuls. So, you had Julius Caesar serving with, how did I just lose his name? Lepidus? I want to say it's Lepidus, but one voted in by one faction, one voted in by the other faction. And the way that they handle that in practice is each one takes a month serving.
Yeah.
So it's like alternating between a Democrat and Republican president every month.
It's terrible.
Okay.
You know,
Oh, go ahead.
It's a little surprising that the rest of the oh man, I've always forgotten the names. These other cities wouldn't realize that Rome really just has a vendetta towards Veii specifically through all this history, and for them to assume that Rome was just on this rampage to take over, that it just hasn't been really their nature.
It's all extremely slow growth. Rome, if you lived in the Roman Empire, pick any period you want, the boundaries of Rome wouldn't really change that much under your life. It is just slow, consistent growth. I mean, there are some jumps that are noticeable, but nothing comes close to like, the Louisiana Purchase of the United States. Not remotely close. Or after the territory we got in the Mexican-American War, not even close. There's no massive acquisitions like that.
Which was brilliant. I mean, it indicates they weren't super ambitious, but it also communicated a message that they're not this threat to all of society.
Well, the way other people see it is they're very long-term thinking.
Yeah.
So it's not that they're not ambitious, it's that I can wait a generation. No, that's okay.
Well, I guess it was just they always wanted to look at it, and if you're out there just rampaging and pillaging and taking whatever you can get away with, that creates such a reputation that you're a problem. And
Well, yeah, they definitely rationalize that as we're spreading civilization.
yeah, but like for instance, their take on Veii, I think, was incredibly justified, especially after their take over on the.
You're going to notice that everything Livy gives us, Rome is going to be justified.
That's also true, but just from
But yes, people are rational actors, acting in rational ways. Yeah. Okay, so now, we just had a huge disaster that year. Next year comes up, we got new military tribunes, whoever they are. We have a problem, because Faleri and Capena decided to join the war. And so now you've got two more armies that you have to deal with. And the only way to deal with two more armies is to somehow expand your own army. And so what Rome ends up having to do, to deal with all these new armies, and they've got to send someone down to try and recapture Anxur, they cannot deal with the Volsci being a consistent threat all through this war. Holding Anxur kind of shuts down the Volsci. And so they need to send an army back there, and they've got to deal with all these armies up here. And so they have no choice, kind of, but to expand the levy. And so they end up doing just that, expanding the levy. They start levying both younger men and older men. And so while the younger men, probably not as much of a big deal to them, the older men, these were the men who have already reached the age where it's understood you are retired from military service. And now you're being sucked right back in. So they're going to be very resentful about that. On the other hand, Rome gets a benefit from this because they're your veterans. And so they're extremely useful to have. And once again, if we expand the amount of troops we have fielded, we got to be able to pay for all these troops. And so once again, taxes are going to have to be increased to pay for even more soldiers. And now, this legislation back at Rome gets passed no problem. Why? Because the patricians pretty much have all the power. And so the tribunes of the plebs, are absolutely furious about this new expansion now. And they're saying that you are forcing all the plebs into slavery, essentially. You have half of us forced into service out there fighting, and the other half of us are forced to basically labor our whole lives away just paying the tax to keep those troops going. Because understand, every soldier you take away, that's one less field being harvested.
And then one more time.
Everyone's going to have to pull a little bit more weight to keep everything afloat. And so it's really starting to strain the plebs back at home, on top of, we're probably into our 4th, 5th year of the war here. That guys have been gone away from Rome, away from their farms. So it's becoming a huge problem. So, to show you how bad of a problem it was, back when they did the election for the tribune of the plebs, they didn't even get enough votes to fill up all 10 tribunes. I think they ended up getting 7 of them that technically had enough votes. Now what happens when you don't get all 10 tribunes voted in? The tribunes internally get to select 3 more people. And so the patricians get them to select 3 people of their choosing. Basically making so that it's 10, but now 3 of them are basically in the patrician's pocket, so to speak. When the plebs find out who the appointments were that these guys decided, it was very clear that the patricians were the ones who had their hand behind this. And so now they are furious, and the patricians are worried that the plebs back at Rome are about to boil over. In particular, the tribunes, who just appointed these 3 new guys, are the most worried that the plebs are going to come after them. And so what they do is they start working the plebs up about those military tribunes who had that big disaster last year. And they start working up outrage about them. And now they're not military tribunes anymore, we can put them on trial. And so they try and use that as an outlet for all the plebs' anger and frustration, and put those guys on trial, find them guilty, no question, and end up fining them. And the distraction largely works. Having that outlet to just call someone just mean, terrible people. The military tribunes were kind of caught off guard. They didn't really think they were going to be punished because they thought the whole embarrassment of being forced to step down was the punishment associated with that. So they weren't too worried about it. Were kind of blindsided by the trial. But it all works out, and the plebs seem to forget that 3 of their tribunes aren't really 3 of their tribunes, at least in the short term. Now, tribunes are still going to keep trying to do what tribunes do. First and foremost, what do tribunes try to get passed every year? The agrarian law. And now there is 0 chance of them getting it passed without the support of the patricians. All they can really do is say no and veto. And they realize there's only one thing left for us to veto. And that is the collection of the war tax. And so now they tell the patricians, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start vetoing the collection of the war tax until you will let us pass the agrarian law. Now we've got an army up in Faleri. Why do we have to keep an army up there? I probably didn't explain that very much. It's not only to stop them as a threat, but it's also kind of the way you keep the army paying for itself. You send the army up there, they can deal with them as a threat, and they can also plunder their surrounding lands. And the plunder of their surrounding lands is going to help pay the soldier's salary. So that's why you have to keep an army up there, kind of trying to get to pay for itself as much as it can. Same with army up at Capena. So you got an army at Faleri, army at Capena, army besieging Veii, and then they also went and they sent an army down to besiege Anxur, trying to take that back. So they got their army spread all over the place. Military tribunes block the tax. Soldiers are furious. They've been away from their farms all this time. All they have to live on is this tax. Now you just took the tax away from them. They know that they're not getting paid. And so they all pretty much just say we're done. So all progress gets halted everywhere, anywhere that they're doing besieging, any sort of construction that they're doing. And the soldiers pretty much say we refuse to do anything until we're going to get paid. And so it completely shuts down all of Rome's war efforts. And so something's got to give. The next year, you have the election of new military tribunes. What ends up happening is, for the first time, one of them is a plebeian. So, whoever it was, Publius Licinius Calvus, 400 BC, for the first time, a pleb now has the highest power in Rome. So, 109 years later. And now with that, the tribunes, being the sneaky guys that they are going to do what? Let the tax be collected. Let the money flow. As though it's this guy somehow pulling it off. Right? If the soldier's not getting paid, they don't care the real reason. They're angry at the guy above them. And now when all the money's coming through, and everyone's being told it's because this guy's in power, and because you put a plebeian in power looking out for plebeian interests, they stop blocking things and everything starts flowing and everything gets a lot better very quickly right after this guy becomes a military tribune. It's almost like magic. And so, this guy comes out looking extremely well in the eyes of all the plebs. And so, taxes are able to be continued, pay is able to get out to the soldiers, and the war effort is now continuing. So continuing to try and besiege out Veii, continuing to try and besiege out Anxur, and the soldiers up near Capena and Faleri will actually go outside their camps and plunder the area and do whatever they're asked to do.
When you say that progress is halted, are you saying that Veii no longer became sieged and that Veii was able to resupply stuff?
No. But that they weren't going to continue the construction of any sort of whatever. And maybe if Veii came out and burned down part of it, they didn't really put up an effort to stop it. I don't know exactly everything that's entailed that. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Pretty warm.
I know, he's been wiping your brow.
Okay. Any other questions? So you put a pleb as a military tribune. Life gets good for you plebs, apparently. And so what ends up happening is, particularly back in Anxur, what the Romans decide to do, since they kind of halted pushing the city, they decide to continue the halt pushing the city, pretending like they didn't get paid. The military tribune there decides to try and capitalize on this thing, and he tries to put up the front, have the soldiers put the front so that the information leaks into the city that they still haven't been paid, and that they're still not going to do anything. And they wait until a festival day comes along for the city, and the city's celebrating the festival. And so they have light guards or whatever, and that's when they decide to just actually scale the walls and just rush into the city. And it works. And so Anxur is quickly retaken with almost no effort. Well, there was the effort of the previous war besieging it, but come this year, happened pretty quick. And so now with that, all the war efforts are able to be consolidated back with the Etruscans. So they're able to take that army, help at Veii as is needed, help up at Capena as is needed, and help at Faleri as is needed with that army. Now, from a plebeian perspective, if one pleb military tribune made my life this much better, imagine what all plebeian military tribunes would be like. And so in the following year, only one patrician is elected as military tribune. 5 of them are plebs. And so now the highest magistracy in Rome is completely overrun by plebs. One patrician. Well, the same year that happened, the elections are going to happen in the wintertime. The winter was a particularly harsh winter. Very cool, things frozen over, kind of shut down trade going on. And it was followed by a diseased summer. Everyone's getting sick. It wasn't particularly deadly, but it was particularly contagious. And it seemed to run through not just humans, but the livestock too. And so, bad year, kind of a disaster of a year, weather-wise. About as bad as it can get. Now remember, the Sibylline books are only consulted in times of absolute disaster. There's only a few times that these are ever consulted. So however awful this is, it's awful enough that these have to be consulted. Can't remember some of the examples of how Livy gives of how shut down everything was, but it's like events that typically required 3 senators to go, they end up sending just 1 senator and 2 equestrians, 2 people of the equestrian class to go take care of that need. So, not killing people, but shutting them all down. Getting very sick. So Sibylline books are consulted. What are we to do about this disease? Here's what we're supposed to do. What is that? Lectisternium? The lectisternium ceremony is what they decide to do. Give you a taste for one of these Roman-type festivals. Here's what they decide to do. Sibylline books are consulted, something about how there's something they need to do to appease the gods. What's actually required of them is they're supposed to take 3 benches and set them out in a public place. There's 6 gods that they're trying to make happy. So it's for the god and his wife god. The god and goddess together on each bench. And you're supposed to set out a feast for them to enjoy. Now, the gods don't feast alone. You feast with the gods. And so you participate in it too, publicly. And so lots of benches are being set out everywhere, and pairs of 3s with food there. It's just understood. Everyone's welcome to come and participate in this thing. It's done publicly at the city's expense. But people in their own homes, you do the same thing. And so people, all for the next 8 days it goes on, they're leaving their front doors completely open. People are welcome to come into your house. Right there at the front of your house, you'd have these 3 benches with some food ready to go. And people are free to come and go as they please, mingling with all sorts of other people, talking with all sorts of people. It's understood that no contentious conversation. All the conversation has to be polite conversation. And even all the prisoners are set free for this, and they get to participate in it. Everyone in the city gets to participate in it. We're all equal in the eyes of the gods, or something like that. I'm not sure the exact rationale. And so it's just 8 days of everyone getting along, feasting, very publicly, everyone mixing with everyone else. Best way to put it into a plague. But that's what they end up doing. Big old celebration. After the celebration, well, I don't know, after or not, but since Rome has less soldiers than they normally do, due to illness in the army, then they have to consolidate their war effort just to Veii itself. Forget trying to fill 3 armies, we're just going to have to stick with what we can maintain at Veii itself. So Rome consolidates its army, or its war effort just to Veii. And so Faleri and Capena, come their campaigning season, they're going to go down, they're going to see what they can do at Veii, and then go back on their merry way. So back at Veii, we got Veii surrounded by defenses, and we got the northern walls, however they're set up. What ends up happening is, since they can only hold up the 1 army, Rome encamped somewhere in here. Since it's just the 1 army, fortunately for Rome, it's only going to come under 1 guy, 1 military tribune, so that's always helpful. But you have the Faleri, they come with their army, they're attacking the walls. You have the Capeni, they come with their army, they're attacking the walls, sorry. Don't read too much into the size of those. And then Veii, when they see what's going on, or it was orchestrated ahead of time, they send out their army to go attack the walls. And now they're going to break through the fortifications while Rome is weak. And so what Rome is required to do, should have drawn those, they're attacking the walls, but just need some space. And so what the Romans decide to do to try and deal with this effort is, first off, they just take the minimum amount of guys they can to hold up the defenses that they built, and just hold off. Your job is not to win, your job is not to push it back, your job is to just hang in there. And so they have little groups surrounding them, they put little groups trying to hold off these guys, and they decide to take the bulk of their army and sally out against one of the armies. So here's the Roman army trying to fight off these guys with other bits holding up everywhere else they can. With one more surprise up their sleeve, they send a smaller group, but still larger than any of these little groups, to go around and try and pretend to be reinforcements coming from Rome and attack the companions from behind. And so they hold out, they sally out to go fight these guys. The companions coming from behind, these guys coming behind the companions, end up getting them to panic first. And so, when they see the army attacking them from behind, they actually decide to flee the battlefield and go charging away. The Faleri, seeing the Capeni fleeing away, think that there must be something they know that we don't know, and so they start fleeing away. And so these guys suffer just a disaster because these guys are just ready to keep going. In particular, they got their cavalry, they were able to get some of their cavalry out quick enough to go ahead and attack them. And now, even though the Romans didn't have armies up in Faleri territory and the Campania territory, they would still send just plundering parties up there. And it just so happened that they were able to get word to the Campanian ones to come back. And so when these guys were retreating, they actually ran into those plundering parties. And so Capena, out of all of them, took the hardest hit. They took a massive hit. These guys took a decent hit. Once they chased them away, the rest of the army is able to come back and consolidate their war efforts on Veii. He says, we're not going to fight. They run back into their city as fast as they can. And Veii makes sure they close the gates even before all the Veii soldiers get in, so there's no chance of any Romans sneaking in there. So the poor, 2% that got left behind got shut out of the gates, and they were killed by the Romans.
It does happen.
That does happen. And so what was on paper, what looked like it was going to be an absolute massive disaster for Rome, even in this time of disease, was able to hang on and actually get a very significant defeat against Faleri and Capena. They suffered some serious losses. These suffered some losses in losing their troops, but it wasn't anything compared to what these guys lost.
It smells defeat.
As people defeat. Okay. Okay, I think we covered all that. And so that's what's happening with that year back at Veii. I don't know how many years in we're in, like 6. 10-year war, so we're getting through it. Any questions with that before we move on to the next year? And now, kind of think about this, again, from just a plebeian perspective. The first year we put in 1 pleb. We quickly retook the city of Anxur, and we got our payback. This next year, where we have 5 plebs, we're able to get this huge victory at Veii that should have been an absolute disaster. So it seems like these plebeian military tribunes are doing a great job. The patricians cannot let that thought settle in. And so the next year, the patricians are going to run their absolute best candidates. And all the patricians are out there campaigning for who they agree amongst themselves are the best patricians. So all the patricians are organizing behind, these are the guys we're putting forward to get elected. And they put forward the people with the absolute best reputations that they have. And they start now trying to win over the plebs again. Remind them that they're friends. Start inviting them to whatever your party is. Socialize with them. And start giving them these arguments for why they should elect your patrician guy. In particular, one of the arguments that they're trying to put in the heads of the patricians is the gods have been furious at how many plebs you guys have been electing. That's why we had the terrible winter we had. That's why we had the terrible summer that we had. That's why we had the plague that we had. And so if you guys would just elect patricians, we wouldn't have to deal with that. And so whatever all their arguments are, all the things that they did to win over the plebs, in spite of the success that the plebeian tribunes had, the following year, all patricians are military tribunes again. And we're back to business as usual. And that following year, the siege of Veii continues. Nothing special happens there. The armies sent up to Faleri and Capena, they're able to plunder the lands, get the wealth enough to continue the military season going on, but nothing else really happens. So just business as usual for the next year. Nothing fancy. But in that year, the Alban Lake, one of the lakes down there by Alba Longa, one of the Alban lakes, it rises inexplicably. They can't figure out why it's suddenly much higher than it used to be. Now, Romans are always on the lookout for whatever omen they can come across. So they got to figure out what the rising of the lake portends, and we got to get our soothsayers and figure out what this means. Now, you probably don't remember this, but all the way back, the Etruscans are kind of viewed as the experts on religion, not the Romans. That's how the Romans view it. And so they often rely upon the Etruscans to help them figure out what these omens mean. Well, they're at war with the Etruscans. So they instantly decide to send a bunch of envoys to Delphi, back in Greece. Now, Delphi, you know its patron god?
It's
Apollo.
Apollo.
yeah.
And one of the things he's a god of is prophesying. And that's why the oracle at Delphi is the one that people always come to looking for some interpretation of what something means, to get some sort of prophecy from her. And so that's where they're all headed to. That's what people in that part of the world do. Romans are no different. They send their people to Delphi to find out what this lake rising means. Now, just some soldier in the Roman army, he's back there at Veii. He knows that the Etruscans, the soothsayers amongst the Etruscans, they know these types of things. They're very wise on religious matters. And while these wars are going on, it's the people talk to each other. And so what ends up happening is a soldier, he somewhat befriended an Etruscan soothsayer. And they talk to each other, he's up there on the wall, the soldier's down here. We're going to take your city today, you're in trouble. Guy up there laughs, not a chance, Roman, whatever. They're going to have conversation back and forth. They know each other. And they even do business amongst each other. And so he tells him that there's been this special omen in my own life. He doesn't tell him about the lake, although the Etruscans most likely already know that the lake went up. He tells him that there's some personal business in my own life that I'd like to get your interpretation on. And so I'd like to hire you to come do that thing. And so the priest says, okay. And so he goes away from the city. They go away from the military camp so that they can go do their business and get his interpretation. And it's an older Etruscan dude and a younger Roman soldier. And so the Roman soldier kind of just overpowers him and hauls him off to the Roman camp when he gets him out there. And then they sits him down and tells him, here's what's going on with the Alban Lake. What does it mean? In case he had any qualms about helping the enemy, makes so he doesn't really have much of a choice about it. And so the soothsayer, the Etruscan soothsayer, he tells him something to the effect of that they won't be able to take, it's a sign, and that they won't be able to take the city of Veii until the lake is drained, or something like that. And that there's a proper way to drain it, but he wouldn't tell him what the proper way to drain it was. Well, they're hesitant to listen to him. They think that they might be messing with him. And so they decide, we'll just keep on waiting. They keep this guy on standby. They don't let him go back. Keep him on standby. And wait until the envoys that they sent over to Delphi to meet with the oracle there get back. And what her words are to the Romans are this: Romans, beware, lest the Alban water be confined in the lake. Beware of suffering it to flow into the sea in its own stream. So there were streams that naturally drained the lake. Thou shalt let it out and form a passage for it through the fields. And by dispersing it in channels, thou shalt consume it. So you got to drain the lake, but you got to make sure it goes into the fields and isn't allowed to wash all the way back out to the streams or to the ocean. It's got to all go into the fields. Then press boldly on the walls of the enemy, mindful that the victory is granted to you by these fates which are now revealed over that city which thou art besieging for so many years. The war being ended, do thou, as victorious, bring ample offerings to my temple there at Delphi. Make sure you send us some gold when you win this victory you're going to win. And having renewed religious institutions of your country, the care of which has been given up, perform them in the usual manner. So saying you've neglected some of your known religious responsibilities back at home, make sure you pick back up on those. But yeah, drain the lake, make sure it goes into the fields, and victory is yours. Apollo guarantees it. But make sure you send back to Apollo what is Apollo's. And so they're kind of impressed with this Etruscan priest. He was pretty close to what they got back from the Oracle of Delphi. He's a local guy, so I think they end up hiring him as like their soothsayer guy. Anyways, so now Rome knows what they need to do. If you want to take that city, you gotta go drain that lake. It's the only way to do it.
How did the feast never go? Were the gods pleased and the sickness go away?
Well, the sickness eventually went away.
So what,
So
the
it must have been
prisoners
peace.
just,
So the
okay,
peace
I'm
must
ready
have
to go
fell.
back after the 8 days?
So this,
How does that work?
there are all sorts of holidays and festivals where that kind of thing happens, and where the prisoners are freed, where the slaves are treated just like everyone else, and everyone kind of goes along with it because that's the festival. It's almost sacrilegious to try and abuse it. You don't want to make the gods angry. So,
murders. just
As
like
far
a-
as we know, people aren't, maybe there were abuses. I would guess that there were some, but.
I was just super grateful to be out. Okay.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's still a part of your culture too. So, had that. Okay, so we talked about the lake getting too full. Okay.
the last one.
Okay, next thing going on. Try and get to my next map here. So, Rome, as you know, we got to build an army here to plunder around Faleri. We got to build an army here to plunder around Capena. We got to build an army here at Veii to besiege Veii. This map is looking south of this one and a little to the east. So here's Rome, here's Rome. And I tried to make them roughly to scale in terms of distances. So they got the army here, here, here. They had an army also down here at Anxur to hang on to Anxur. The Volsci are actively now trying to besiege the city, trying to take it back, so they got to hang on to it. Can't let the Volsci get it back. The Aequians decided, hey, everyone's attacking Rome. Now's a good time to get back one of our cities, Levici, which is right there on the map. And so the Aequians are now trying to get that city, and so Rome has to hang on to that city from being conquered by the Aequians. So they're spread out, fighting on 5 different fronts.
All within cities.
2 of them, they're on the defense. 3 of them, they're on the offensive. Okay, trying to put all together on just one map. These will be very roughly because I'm not that familiar with the geography. But so you're going to have Anxur's easy. That's right there. Somewhere up here for fighting the Aequians. Here at Veii, and then one there and one there, something like that, are the places where Rome's armies are scattered out. Plus, they have to keep a small garrison back at Rome, some troops there. With all that going on, the Tarquinians, that city's located like right there, they know Rome's spread out on all these fronts. They decide not to go to war with Rome, but we're just going to come down and plunder some Roman territory and take it and go back. We're not going to try taking any cities or anything like that, just take a bunch of plunder. Rome will be so busy dealing with all these other people, they won't have any time to deal with us. And so they decide to go do that. And they come down in the territory and they plunder a bunch of the territory, get whatever they want. And by the time they're heading back, Rome is finally getting word that they showed up to do this thing. The Romans, rather than being furious, or rather than being scared of the Tarquinians, are more angry than anything. They're kind of outraged. They're like, they really think just because we're so busy all over the place, we're going to let them get away with this? And so the tribune that they kept there, he gathers up as many troops as he can, gathers up a bunch of volunteers, and they quickly book it for the Tarquinian land. And they're able to catch up with the Tarquinians, because the Tarquinians are the one carrying all the plunder, before they're able to get into the city. The Tarquinians are absolutely shocked to see some Roman army there. They catch them by complete surprise. They're able to kill the army, take back the plunder, and they decide, we're going to keep plundering until we're full. And so they plunder all over the Tarquinians. And this was a huge help to the Romans, because building this many armies, they're running out of places to pull money from. They can't just keep ransacking the same lands, getting the same amount of plunder each time. And so having access to these Tarquinians, who haven't been involved in much war for the past little bit, they had a good amount of wealth for the Romans to take and haul off with. And so that round of plunder from the Tarquinians largely helps them stay afloat for the next military year. So thank goodness for those Tarquinians, keeping us afloat.
They started it.
Is the tradition of plunder going into the treasury and then paying the soldiers with the tax, is that becoming more of a thing? And that the soldiers don't actually get what they plunder?
Yes. So you cannot let the soldiers keep what they plunder, because a small portion are doing the plundering. That's correct. So yes, the plunder is now being taken from the soldiers, sold into the treasury, and then that money is being spent, distributed to all the soldiers to pay them. On top of that, a tax is being collected from the actual Romans back at Rome to help pay for it as well. So the war efforts alone don't pay for themselves. You still have to tax the citizens, but they can help. Oh, there were 2 military tribunes back at Rome, I guess, for whatever reason. So 2 of them go out and fight them, or maybe 1 stayed behind and 1 went to go do it. Regather the plunder Tarquinii land, use the surplus to ease the taxes for the soldiers' pay. Okay, I think I covered all that.
Well, if you have 6 military tribunes and like 4 armies out, of course there would be 2.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they would be split up at this time. Your guys defending may or may not need a military tribune there. You definitely need 1 for Faleri, 1 for Capena, at least 1 for Veii. I guess there's 1 for Faleri, 1 for Capena, 2 for Veii, 2 in Rome. The 2 on the defensive just had the troops to defend and didn't need a commander. But I'm not positive how they were divided up. Okay. So with that, now look at this from an Etruscan perspective. Rome is besieging Veii, one of your greatest cities, and they seem to kind of be hanging on. They absolutely destroyed the armies at Faleri and Capena, and now they came and they just marched right up into Tarquinii. They passed one of the 12 Etruscan cities along the way, Curie or something like that, whatever its name was. No hesitation. The Etruscans are starting to become seriously worried about these Roman guys to the south. It's one thing if they're after Veii, but the way that they're taking on more and more of the Etruscans is making the rest of the Etruscans more and more worried. And so, all of Etruria gets together, the 12 cities, and they discuss what to do about this growing Roman threat. In particular, Faleri and Capena are pushing for intervention by the Etruscans, basically saying Rome couldn't stand up to all of us. Let's all go down there and just put an end to this thing. That's essentially the argument that they're making. And remember, different cities in Etruria have very different relationships with Rome. For example, Clusium is on a pretty good relationship with Rome. They're one of the ones that keeps supplying them with food in times that they need food. So not all the Etruscans feel the same way about Rome. Some are their friends, some are their enemies, some are more neutral, some are less. Anyways, so trying to talk all of the Etrurians into mobilizing against the Romans and putting an end to the Roman threat. The Etruscans are kind of starting to be tempted by this offer. They're getting worried by how far into their land the Romans are starting to push. But they have a new problem. These people called the Gauls have started coming down into their lands and have started pushing some of the Etruscans out of their lands. And so they have this new threat to the north. And they don't dare mobilize all their troops down to the south. They think that risks the invasion getting much, much worse. The Gauls are kind of a wild card to them at this point. They don't really know what to expect from them. They don't know much about them. Very warlike people now crossing down into northern Italy, coming across the Appalachian Mountains. And so what they decide to do is, while none of the cities will formally send their army, what we will allow is for volunteers who want to go. So you can go gather volunteers from the cities, not the ones who are going to have to serve in that city's military for the upcoming year, and you can use those guys to go and try and fight the Romans. And so gathering up the volunteers that they can, they're able to, Faleri and Capena, they're able to largely renew their numbers with those troops coming in, those new volunteers from the Etruscans. Okay, so that's what's going on with the Etruscan thinking. Back at Rome, new tribunes come into power. This is just another one to give you a sense for what Rome's like. One of the guys who gets elected, he didn't even run, and they elected him anyways just because of his reputation. And he's an older guy, and he's already served a couple times. And he tells them, I am too old, guys. That's why I didn't run, and so I am not going to be serving as your military tribune. But what I will do is I will appoint my son to serve in my stead. And so his son, who is not elected by the people just accept him as a replacement. Again, giving you this idea, it's not about individuals, it's the family line. You might remember back to the Fabians and how they kept picking people out of the Fabian family. And so, completely accepted, and so his son, instead of him, ends up serving in military tribune, even though his son wasn't elected. Just giving you a taste for it. Now, Rome's going to do the same thing that they always do when it comes to this. here's a map I'm looking for. They're going to send an army up to Faleri, an army up to Capena, and then they're going to have the bulk of their soldiers up there blockading Veii, continuing the siege against Veii. So these new military tribunes come to power. Faleri and Capena, they had suffered huge defeats a couple of years ago, taking huge losses to their numbers. And so the last time that they went and they marched in their lands, they kind of did it a bit recklessly, carelessly, because they don't stand a chance fighting against us. Well, this time, they have renewed numbers due to volunteers coming down from the Etruscans. And so the Romans, armies that come up here, are caught completely off guard. They're both ambushed. So this army gets ambushed and this army gets ambushed. This one, it gets ambushed. When it gets ambushed, the soldiers panic, they rout, and they go fleeing all the way back. It's such a disaster, their military tribune is killed. And so they lose their leadership, and they're just running all the way back. They take some decent losses. These guys, when they get ambushed, they're able to quickly retreat to just a hill in the area, and the military tribune really quick has them set up defenses and just hold out against the ambush until the ambushers give up. And then once that happens, he's able to march his army back. But soldiers fleeing down here, saying what's going on. And there was some known that these guys were ambushed and were fighting in an ambush. And so word spreads that 2 armies up north were defeated, and that 1 military tribune for sure is dead, as people are running all the way back to Rome. Understand, I don't know, what are we looking at here? 25 miles, something like that? That's it.
It's only like a 4-mile walk.
I think Veii is only 10 miles north of Rome.
I think it takes Alba Longa and Rome. I did a Google Maps simulation of walking, and it was 8 hours.
An 8-hour walk between these two. Okay. So these, remember, they're closer than you think. When I say Anxur is clear out there, it's, I don't know, what would it have been, like 60 miles, something like that?
Apparently it's significant.
Yes, it's significant for the way warfare is going on at the time. Anyways, so the soldiers fleeing back are spreading word of what happened to them. And so the story being told is that this army was annihilated, this army was annihilated, and 2 full armies are now marching to Veii. As these guys are running down, the guys holding out at the siege of Veii, hearing that 2 armies are coming, they themselves start to panic a little bit. And a chunk of these soldiers also flee from Veii to Rome. Now, the military tribunes in charge here quickly put an end to that, so some do flee away, but they're able to reestablish control, saying, no, we're not going anywhere, we're staying right here, calm down. But there is that panic in that story all the way back to Rome, and even for a while back in Rome, people are panicking, the story getting so bad, that all 3 of them were defeated, and that the siege on Veii had been completely lifted, and all the Etruscans are now coming down on us, and we're doomed. So panic spreads very quick when someone who just saw a general die can be there within a few hours. So panic, panic, panic. Fortunately for the Romans, the military tribunes here are able to hang on, and that guy's just holding out defenses, making sure he's not getting ambushed again, being very conservative now, not underestimating them, not underestimating their numbers.
Survivorship bias.
And so, the guy who did the defensive camp, when he realizes that the army's actually not there, he does a nice controlled retreat out of their territory. Not going to be ambushed again. We're going to regroup. And so, there were some losses, but the losses were not that bad. And so, the way Levy puts it is more of a disgrace than a loss was sustained by the Romans that day. So, just absolutely humiliating for him what happened. But in terms of numbers, they're still okay. But puts an end to that campaigning season and any hopes of going up north and getting plundered. Not only are they not going to have their hopes of going up north and getting plundered, they lost their camps. So understand, your camp is where your soldier would have kept a lot of his possessions. There could have been a lot of soldiers who, for example, lost their arms in that fleeing as well, that you're going to have to rearm. And so it's an expensive thing when the army loses their military camps. So Rome lost 2 camps and got no plunder that year.
When supplied their army, or Or their enemies.
And supplied their enemies with the plunder. And so, treasury-wise, this is a very bad day for Rome. Let's continue with the siege before we talk about the Gauls. I want to get into the Gauls and give you some of the Gauls, but we might come back to him after we finish the siege. So, that year, absolute disaster. Rome's in as tough a spot as they've ever been. People are being pushed to the limit with the tax. There's just no way we can continue. Luckily for the Romans, that next year, we're now at 405 BC, is finally the year that the Alban Lake has been drained the way that it's supposed to be drained. And so it's going into the fields, and so all their problems are solved. Apollo has said so. And so now, it's time to go take Veii. Right? Lake Stream. Okay. Now, they don't want to have to deal with any disasters of military tribunes fighting for the glory, none of that nonsense. And so they appoint a dictator. Marcus Furius Camillus. One of the great names of the old Roman Empire, or the old Roman Republic. By the time we're all done with him, he's considered the second founder of Rome. I'll tell you what level of Roman he is. So that name's not going anywhere. Marcus Furius Camillus. We'll be talking about him a lot. Now, he was a military tribune 3 times throughout these wars, so he's proven himself a competent military tribune fighting these guys. He had many military successes of his own, and so he seems like the best guy for the job when it comes to finally putting an end to Veii. Now, first thing Camillus wants, he's a very stern, strict man, and he wants to make sure that no panics happen like what happened last time. He wants to make sure that his army is more afraid of him than his army is afraid of the enemy. So first thing he does is every single one of the troops who fled, talking about both from Veii and from the army that was set up against Faleri, are punished. And so he has them punished and then a bunch of them killed. I think that they were decimated. It is me trying to read into the way Livy said it. You remember how decimation works?
1/10.
10 of you get together, draw straws. Whoever draws a short straw, the other 9 kill them. You get a bunch of groups of 10. So 1/10 of them killed, they're decimated. But before that, they're all nice and beaten. So you beat them all so everyone gets some punishment, and then 1 of 10 of you are going to be decimated. Because odds are, if you keep on fighting, you're not going to lose 1/10 of your army. That's very rare for the army that doesn't retreat. Okay, so Camillus, he's got the army fearing him. Now, what he does is he's going to levy as many troops as he can, right there at Rome. So if he's already got the troops committed that he's got, he's going to levy all the troops at Rome that he can. That's not enough for him. He's then going to go to the Latin and Hernici land, Rome's allies, and require them to contribute troops to the war effort now. So your allied troops are also contributing their numbers. And with that, he takes his army, and first thing he does is he goes up to Faleri and Capena. He gets them, he harasses them to come out and fight him, come out of their cities and fight him, plundering the lands around him, whatever. Gets them to really quick come out and fight him, wins a decisive victory against both of them in the field. So there's no chance of them coming down to Veii this year. They'd have to wait another year for their next campaigning season. And then with that, he comes to Veii. And so now all the Roman army is centered right there at Veii. No one's out in the field anywhere else, except for your garrison down at Anxur. All consolidated together there at Veii. Now, first thing he does is he makes the fortifications around Veii way more massive. So here's Veii. The fortifications around Veii, not so much the northern ones. We're focusing all our effort here because we know we're safe from the north for a while. And he says, we're done. There were constantly just attacks going on back and forth, trying to probe for weakness here, there, whatever. We're done with any attacks against Veii. No one attacked. All we're going to do is hang on to our defenses wherever they come, and we're only going to defend against them. And with the renewed defenses, it should always just be an easy win. We should be able to hang on, no problem. So no chance of any Veii getting out and harassing us as we're working on our own stuff. Going back to, remember, this is just an artist reconstruction of the city. So we're going to pretend it's the truth. It's not the truth. Okay. He has his fortifications, though, actually tie into the mountain. So there's a wall there, largely making it up, but a place where we actually come up against the city. And it's a place so that the Etruscans, they can't come and interfere with us in this particular place. What he does is he takes the bulk of his men now, and he splits them up into 6 groups. And he has them work in 6-hour shifts on a mine into the mountain. So you, 6 hours on, 30 hours to rest. 6 hours mining, 30 hours to rest. 6 crews working 6-hour shifts. Completely switch out every 1.5 days. And so they're just going to start working on constructing a mine into the side of the mountain here. Trying to get into, this part is the citadel, which is the most defended part of the city. So these walls are going to be superior to these walls. So it's a citadel that he's constructing his mine into. And in his mining process, he gets access into some sort of drainage system that the city has. Got to let your water out somehow. And so he gets hooked up into, mines his way into some sort of drainage system. And the drainage system comes out in the temple of Juno. We're going to pretend it's that temple. No idea which one.
That's highly fortunate.
Highly fortunate. I think he intended to just mine all the way.
Yeah. Not only that, but did Veii know they were mining?
I don't know how much they knew, but what he made sure is that no one was going to get access to where they were working. 0 chance of that happening. So I don't know how secret he was able to keep it. I don't know how known it was, but
They probably knew something was up.
definitely no one gets to get through.
Yeah.
Almost impossible to get access to that point, whatever is going on. And in the meantime, the Romans stopped any assault from anywhere else around the city, so things are very quiet everywhere else. And just a few guys staying on guard. Anytime some Veii soldiers come out, quickly repel them, and that's it. We don't pursue them. We don't try doing anything fancy. Just repel them and hang on.
It's quiet, too quiet.
Yep.
Situation.
It's a quiet, too quiet type situation. Connects into the sewage once they figure out where it goes. Or I'm not sure if it's sewage, some sort of drainage system though. He then sends word back to the Senate at Rome. He tells them basically, I think I'm ready to launch my assault on the city, and I think we're to the point where we can now push to actually take the city. The big question is the plunder. Veii's massive compared to all these other guys. And so he wants to know what the Romans want, what the Senate wants to happen with the plunder. In particular, he doesn't want to be the guy to tell soldiers you don't get any plunder, if that's what it's going to come down to. And so back at Rome, the Senate starts debating, what are we going to do with all this plunder? Now they're broke as broke can be. No chance they're going to be able to pay their soldiers the salary that they're owed this year, as it currently stands. And so what one of the arguments is, we'll take all the plunder. What we'll do is we'll pay the soldiers their salary. Well, pay them their salary, and we'll stop any of the citizens from having to pay a tax this year. So none of our citizens will be required to take a tax. And we'll do some sort of reimbursement for some past back taxes type thing. The other side of the argument is no. Even though that might, on paper, help out the plebs more, they won't appreciate it as much as them having the plunder in their own hands. They appreciate a gold coin much more that they go and get from the city than the one that on paper they technically got paid because now they don't have to pay us. And so even though that might make more sense on paper, we want them to actually feel the plunder and see the plunder themselves that we're getting from the city and experience it themselves and see how great it is, the plunder that we're getting. And so they tell all the people at Rome, get the forum together, they say, all of you who want plunder from Veii, in the morning, march over to Veii. And so all the citizens who want to participate, all march over to Veii. And so out Veii, now you just got a bunch of Romans just hanging out here. While the Roman army surrounded, they've got their fortifications actually built to the city of Veii, so their mining operations going on right there, something like that. And so, once all the Romans get there, you can imagine being on the walls of Veii, seeing what's going on, what on earth is going on here. They think they're moving in? I don't know what they thought. And when they're ready to do it, what Camillus orders is an all-out attack of all the soldiers just attacking the walls. So they're all, running up, trying to get ladders up. That's a joke. No chance. The Veisians are up there giggling as you're trying to bring up these little ladders and try and get over the walls. And so they scatter out throughout the walls, repelling all the Roman assaults coming up. It's not a problem. Well, he sent his elite soldiers into the mines to go up and come out in the Temple of Juno. That's where the most serious of his army is going. The rest, just a diversion. And how much the citizens participate in that, no idea. But just absolute chaos everywhere else. Make it seem like you're trying to do something, where the real battle is happening inside here. And they're able to come out of the temple and quickly take the citadel. And once they got the citadel, the army is able to go into Veii proper. Now remember, a city citadel, that's where you retreat to in times of panic. The Romans now have control of the citadel. And so now, as Romans are getting into the city, people are panicking seeing Romans in the city. And where do all the panicking people run to? The citadel, where the Romans are most concentrated. And so it is an absolute bloodbath for these poor people of Veii. All of them trying to fight and retreat to the citadel. And so word spread, Rome's in the city, Rome's in the city. And so all the soldiers are running from the walls trying to get to the citadel, where Rome's at its strongest. And since they abandoned all the walls, all the other soldiers in the army are able to just easily climb up over the walls now and get into the city and scale the walls. And so now Veii is just completely overrun with Romans, with all the Venetian soldiers trying to run back to the citadel, where the Romans are most fortified, where the most elite of the Roman army is. Absolute disaster for Veii. Now, once it's realized that Veii's been taken, Camillus very loudly gives out orders and sends criers throughout the city of Veii, harm none that don't hold arms, or spare all who don't hold arms, something to that effect. And so that's what they go screaming through the city. And once Venetians hear that, they all drop their arms and surrender. So absolute confusion, absolute disaster for Veii. Once they realize they can just drop their arms and it will be over, they drop their arms and now it gets to be over. And when they all drop their arms, now it's looting time. And so Rome goes nuts, looting the city of Veii. And they are shocked as they plunder the city of Veii how much wealthier Veii was than them. Turns out, Veii was the wealthiest of the 12 Etruscan cities. So super well fortified and super wealthy. So now tons of wealth flowing into Rome. And the people get to go actually touch it, haul it. That's my plunder. As much as any person can haul back to Rome is theirs, is I think how the technical verbiage goes. So, anything they're able to haul off, the people are allowed to haul off. All the actual citizens now of Veii, those belong to the state of Rome. So you don't get people as plunder, just what you can haul off with you. All Rome is going to take is it's going to take all the people that were there and sell them into slavery, and that will be what is used to renew the Roman treasury. Now, where are all these slaves going to go? Common thing in wartime, when enemy A meets enemy B and takes some of their people as slaves, you typically just sell them back to them. So odds are the majority of these people are just going to be sold back to the Etruscans. But I don't know the actual logistics of where they all end up. But that's a very normal practice.
Makes sense.
All right, no one wants Etruscan slaves more than
It's more
Etruscan
like
cities.
ransoming. That makes sense.
Yeah, but the people who surrender to you in war, they're slaves. That's what they are.
Yeah. But,
Anyways,
no, I love how we fulfill our own prophecies.
yeah. Thank goodness we drained that lake. And it shows you how much psychology comes into this, the morale of the people doing it. If the gods are on my side, how can we lose? Not a chance. And so we go, we win.
Believing you.
Well, it was still good military strategy, good leader, good all things around, but yeah. So Veii, after 10 long years, is finally taken by the Romans. They have it. The people, they get all their wealth. They're very happy. The state of Rome, through selling the slaves, they get a good of money coming back into the treasury. Everyone's pretty happy. Except the Etruscans.
I think they would hide some of their wealth
Doesn't matter. They're being sent off somewhere, so.
for, like,
They could have tried. I mean,
I get this is
that
happening
definitely
for
happens
years.
many
You could
times,
think this
but-
might happen and hide some of the wealth.
this isn't just a shock to Veii. This is a shock to
Oh,
Italy. Veii was just taken. That's not possible. Veii was just taken. It is a huge psychological hit to all of Rome's enemy. They were able to do the impossible. People knew the city of Veii. They knew what its defenses were. Considered one of the best defended cities there were. When the Romans take it, they're thinking this city's way better than our city. It's amazing. And the Romans just took the city. So this is a huge psychological hit to the rest of Italy. I didn't tell you Camillus' prayer that he offers up to the god before he starts the attack. So this is just a piece of it. But under thy guidance, O Pythian Apollo, and inspired by thy divinity, I proceed to destroy the city of Veii, and I vow to thee the 10th part of the spoil.
Wow.
Because remember, they had to send back
Yes.
as part of the prophecy. So then we order the all-out attack. People of Veii proceed to go to the state. And then when it comes to the gods at Veii, I think the patron god of Veii was Juno, or what evolves into Juno. And so the gods there and the statues there in the temples, the Romans are extremely reverent with. And so they're going to bring them back to the Roman temples. Juno, these guys didn't take care of you. Come live with us. We'll take care of you, and you bless us. That's the arrangement. So in particular, it's Juno that they love here. And one of the temples that they're now going to build is they're going to build a new temple on the Capitoline Hill in their citadel for Juno. The Venetians had a temple to Juno in their citadel. Now we're going to have one for you in our citadel that you can have. So they moved the gods into Rome. So Rome's got more gods at her back, helping her out. And they get all the plunder. Did I miss anything?
They probably don't
I think I got
make the mistake that they made last time where they allow any of the citizens of Veii to
they learned their lesson with Feuding. This is old, bitter hatreds.
yes.
That there has not been a rivalry brewing longer in Roman history than the rivalry between Veii and Rome. Because Veii they weren't just an enemy of the Romans, they were an enemy of the Latins.
Yeah.
Going all the way back to early conflicts, Aeneas, I think, was supposed to have fought against Veii.
Before Romulus.
Aeneas is the one who left Troy and came and settled.
Wow.
So
That's far.
now that's the fictional part, but the conflicts with Veii are supposed to have gone that far back between Veii and the Latins, and they settled on the Tiber River as a boundary between the Etruscans and the Latins. So old bitter rivalry for these two peoples finally resolved after, hundreds of years, all of Rome's existence. Okay, so now bringing all the wealth back to the city, what's Rome going to do? They're going to celebrate, they're going to have a triumph. Triumph, big old parade basically, and it's going to be the best, most extravagant triumph that the city has ever celebrated. Never has this much wealth flowed into the city of Rome before. And so since it's such a great triumph, Camillus, the general who's having the triumph, he ends up having his chariot pulled by 4 white horses. Now, what's the big deal? That is not something that was done in triumph since the days of the kings. When we got to the Roman Republic, the way the general would present himself was supposed to be much more modest. Now he's behaving much like the way the kings of old did. And so, even though it's the greatest triumph ever, it kind of rubs them the wrong way that Camillus entered the city this way, being pulled by the 4 white horses, seen as excessive, seen as doing it like a king. On top of that, Camillus tells him, all that plunder you ran off with, 1/10 of it is for Apollo. That was the agreement. And so all you guys who hauled off that plunder, you need to go back home, get 1/10, and we got to give that as tribute to Apollo. And the people don't really want to do that, but the patricians step in and the priests step in and say, no, we kind of have to. That was the agreement with Apollo. He helps us take the city, we give him 1/10. And so The people resentfully comply, but again, they're starting to resent this guy, Camillus, more and more. Now, I told you it's a huge psychological hit to the rest of the world that Veii was just taken. In particular, the Volscian and the Aequians. They say, we're done. We don't want to fight anymore. And so they instantly start suing for peace. Rome decides to give them peace, mostly out of war weariness. They don't want to fight them, because they still have Faleri and Capena up north to deal with. So the war is not over with the Etruscans, it's just with Veii.
Faleri and Capena would continue fighting even after losing Veii.
Kind of. So they continue for one more campaigning season. After they lose there, Capena turns around and they sue for peace. And so now it's only Faleri that's going to continue their resistance against the Romans. Now, Veii, I told you, it's a way better city than Rome. That's the way they see it. It's a more beautiful city. Look at the defenses that the city has. This is a great city. And so now the tribune of the plebs from here on out are going to start pushing to go occupy Veii. Now, what do they have in their minds? The agrarian law. Remember, the lands around Rome are technically occupied, even though they're not really owned by anyone. The lands around Veii, you can't say that those are occupied. And so, let's move a bunch of the city's population over to Veii. In particular, what they want is half the patricians and half the plebs to go move to Veii, and kind of set it up like there's two different Romes. And then we can start utilizing all that land over there, and plebs can have land over there, and we can start growing the way we want to over there. Now, the Senate and the patricians outright refuse. They say, this isn't even something we're going to argue about. This isn't something we're going to debate about. If you try to do this, it's going to come to violence. And so if you're not ready to kill me, give it up now. This is just beyond unthinkable to them, that we would abandon the city of Rome. Not a chance. And they make their different arguments, like, how disgraceful would it be if right after Veii is defeated by the Romans, it becomes a superior city to the Romans, and stuff like that, trying to work a patriotic argument into them. And then there's a religious argument. After we were just had this great victory, are we going to abandon the city of our gods to this city that they just gave to us, essentially, that they just turned over to us? The gods have already decided that this is the superior city. And so they make their different arguments, but they make it very clear, there's not a chance, we're not even arguing this. You're going to have to kill me if you want to go any further. And the plebs aren't ready to go that far. The ones pushing it. A bunch of the plebs agree with them. So it's kind of a 50-50 split, but doesn't even get put up to the vote. Now, to try and ease the tensions, because what the tribunes really want, the tribunes of the plebs really want, is the agrarian law. This was a roundabout way to try and get the agrarian law. And so what they do is, in the peace that they got with the Volsci, they got more lands. In particular, what's happening is Rome is slowly getting more and more control of the lands between Anxur and Rome. Those Volsci lands are slowly falling into more and more Roman control. And so they got a bunch of those lands in the treaty that they just had with the Volsci. And so they sent a colony of 3,000 to these different lands to go and start farming them. I think each one got like 3 1/4 acres or something like that. So quick 10,000 acres that they got, and started putting to use to try and help calm the people down. Now, even though they did that and they turned over 1/10 of the plunder, continuing forward, now Camillus, he's no longer the dictator, but he's still telling them, we have not fulfilled our promise to Apollo. All we did was turned over 1/10 of the plunder. There's also the lands that we got. We have to assess the value of the lands that we got, come up with its value, and send 1/10 of that along to Apollo as well. We owe him 1/10 of what we got from the city. Well, now people are really furious to even have to be paying that. The priests are consulted, and the priests say, yes, that's what was promised. They agree that that was what the promise was, and so they have to do that. And so once again, well, it has to be gathered up from the people. Now, this is fast forwarding like a year. What did these people do with all this plunder that they got? They largely just went and spent it. A bunch of them will be coming back to farms that they hadn't been working in a while, so they'd be really quick just basically reinvesting it into whatever they had all along, plus paying off whatever debt they may have accumulated while gone, stuff like that. The point is the plunder is largely gone. They don't have much to pay with anymore. And now they're being required to do this real quick tax, once again, to help pay for this. So everyone's furious at Camillus. They try and gather the money that they can from the plebs, but it's clear that there isn't enough of the plunder remaining to fulfill this promise. And so what ends up happening is a bunch of matrons in the city volunteer to take the debt on a bunch of the wealthier ones, volunteer to take the debt upon themselves, and they basically hand over all their jewelry to help do it. And so they win some special honors in the city. I can't remember exactly what they were, but everyone's grateful to them for taking on that religious responsibility and finishing the payment of that debt. And so with that, they're square with Apollo. Paid their debts.
Nice.
And they hate Camillus more than ever.
This guy's a father.
Huh?
Father of Rome.
The second founder of Rome is what we will call him by the time his story is over. And so with Camillus having all this resentment against him, the tribune of the plebs now are going to start working the assembly up against him so that they can bring trial against him. Now, they don't really care about bringing trial against Camillus. They care about the agrarian law. And so the implication is, you patricians help us with the agrarian law, or we're going to get rid of one of your big shots that you love, and one that has a lot of influence in the city. And Camillus, if you don't want to be driven out of the city, you should help us pass the agrarian law. So it's meant to be a tactic, ultimately, to get the agrarian law passed, not because they really care that much about Camillus. But since he's hated by the city, that's the tactic. Same thing that they've used in the past many, many times.
When do you want to talk about the Gauls?
Yeah, I was just thinking, probably go back and talk about the Gauls now. That's probably a good place to jump back. Because the Gauls are going to be entering our story really quick here. Rome's going to be fighting the Gauls in like 4 more years. So let's quickly talk about the Gauls. So the people that become the Gauls, I'm going to call them the early Gauls, but if you were to go look them up online, here's what you want to look up, the Hellstat people. These are people who, they originate sometime around 1200 BC is roughly when they're becoming significant in the world. And they started somewhere, can't remember exactly where, but somewhere like right there. Now around 1200 BC is when we were getting the Bronze Age collapse. So going all the way back to the Bronze Age collapse, you remember the peoples that migrated south and ultimately became the sea peoples? A bunch of those people that migrated south were in this area. It's during the Bronze Age collapse that the Latins themselves showed up in Italy. So same time period where these guys are moving down. I think the Latins are supposed to have been from more of the Caucasus area, Caucasus Mountains area. Huh?
So they're like the same people?
Now, the locals here, Latins seem to have come from further east. But the same time period, Latins are moving down, same time that these guys are moving down.
We're gonna see
The seas peoples.
these people.
Yeah. The ones that migrate along the seas and cause havoc everywhere. Now, it wasn't some organized army moving down. It was just peoples moving down, migrating southward over a couple of 100-year period. Some of them organizing into armies,
So
but just
multiple different factions coming down.
for sure, multiple different factions coming down. We're talking about spread over centuries, all sorts of different types of peoples. Some of them, amalgams getting together and working together, all sorts of crazy things. But yes, massive migration causing all sorts of chaos as they migrate. As they're leaving the area, that's when the Hellstat people are able to kind of expand into the area and start growing into the area. And so they reach their peak around 600 BC is what this is showing, trying to give you a rough idea of their influence. So 600 BC, here's roughly where the Hellstat people are. You have the Etruscans here. Rome's just going to be little Rome at the time, just a city-state. Little bit of influence outside the city-state. Magna Graecia, the Greeks down there, the Phoenicians over here. Now, while they're occupying a ton of space, relative to like the Etruscans or the Greeks or the people further south, they don't have very much social structure, so it's not going to be tons of people. And they're going to be organized into mostly just small villages oriented around hills. There would be some hill where a fort is built on top of, and then villages around that hill, and that's your main defenses in time that you need defense. But they're largely just going to be farmers. So they're farming, they're scattered all throughout the area, trying to put together a very rough estimation looking at maybe 1 to 2 million people in that whole area. Roughly the time that we were talking about Rome was 150,000.
What about all of Italy?
I don't know.
Okay.
But the point is, they are not organizing into urban centers. They are very spread out people. Very, largely farm. That's largely what they did. And very simple structures, very simple city structures. Now, one big disclaimer when it comes to these people, almost everything we know is through archaeology. And so we have to try and just piece together random things that we can, mostly from what we find in burial mounds. For whatever reason, they're more important people when they bury them. They basically build simple structures around it and put together a little hill around that and put their nice people inside there. It's through the artifacts that we find in those burial mounds that we largely try to piece together what these people would have been like. But there isn't really a ton to go on, outside of when they communicate with peoples that we actually know about, like the Greeks who are writing stuff down. What we do know is, in terms of trade, one of the things that helps them expand all over the place is trade, and it's because there are natural copper mines and tin mines in the area. And so that's largely what's helping them gather wealth into their region and trading with the outside world to help them expand the way that they did. Now, why are copper and tin so important? Bronze. Copper and tin together give you bronze. And during the Bronze Age collapse, what's largely happening is people are losing their connections to their local bronze supplier. And so anyone who can get it from wherever you can, it becomes very valuable. Demand, or the supply drastically drops, and so the demand goes up. And so they're able to use that to get them wealth. And then the other thing that are always mining is salt. And why is salt so important? To preserve your meat during the wintertime. It's used as a preservative. And what they are largely importing is iron. Understand that they're going into the Iron Age. And as you go from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age, it's not like everyone says, iron's better than bronze. We're going to stop using bronze. Bronze is still being used left and right, and they're working with iron. Now, while they are very simple people with most respects, one way that they are very advanced compared to like the Etruscans is they are great at metalworking. And they seem to have a very good understanding of metal, and they're putting together great metal artifacts. And so you can guess that maybe they somehow knew that iron was superior to bronze in terms of the strengths that it had and whatever it had. But so great metal workers, that's the way that they stand out. Very surprising. And so simple social structures, hills, villages, farming's how they're making their living, but also great metal working, surprising. Largely peaceful relative to the times. Tribes would fight tribes all the time for control of land or whatever, but they're not constantly warring like the Romans are constantly warring.
Amongst each other, supposedly.
Yeah, amongst each other.
And
You
no
need
one
your little
wants to go
territory.
up there 'cause it's freezing cold.
Yeah, freezing cold area. Hope I can remember this off the top of my head, but it's Europe is shockingly cold until about 300 AD, or 300 BC, I mean. It's like a mini ice age or something that they call it. And so all of Europe was pretty cold for, I can't remember when it starts, but until about 300 BC, if I remember right, is when it finally starts warming up a bit again. So yes, it would have been very cold where they're living as well. So that's the way that they're living. And these are the early Gauls. Any questions with the early Gauls? Also, did I miss anything? Oh, one thing I was going to say is while they were largely living in villages, they actually did get a couple urban centers together. And so this top picture on the right, not sure how well you can see it, is meant to be attempted reconstruction of one of their best cities. So they find the remains to it, and it's attempted visual reconstruction of one of their more urban-like centers. But outside of that, but that was extremely rare. That was not in any way the norm. Mostly villages scattered throughout the area.
It's very organized.
And very tiered. You know, tier. But for the most part, it's going to be hills with forts on top of the hills, farms and villages around those forts. Now, the culture changes quite drastically in terms of how warlike they become, to the best we can tell. Maybe they were always warlike and we just don't have the evidence for it. But to the best that we could tell, we get a transition towards them becoming a much more warlike people. And this is transitioning to the people that we actually get in histories. These armies actually existed and talked to people who were writing stuff down. So getting closer to history and a better understanding of who they were, we now get to what we typically call the Gauls. If you were a historian, you would call them the Celts. Celts, Gauls, same thing for the purposes of our story. The Romans call them the Gauls, so I'm going to stick with Gauls.
I thought the Celts were in the UK.
They expanded up into the UK, so there was a Celts there, and over into Ireland. The Celts very much help inform the, starts with a G, Gaelic.
The Gaelic were in the UK.
The Gaelics are Ireland.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And it's very much Celtic informed. And so same peoples, but the cultures change however the cultures change. And this map is trying to highlight in lighter green the three areas, as far as we can tell, where these transitions from the Hallstatt people to the Gauls mostly took place. But still going to be the same peoples. But just a transition in the culture. Transition in the culture over a 150-year period. So it's not like one night they said, hey, we're warriors. But the transition seems to be towards, hey, we're warriors. That's what we now orient around. And so now this new culture, warrior is everything. The best man is the best warrior. Those are the same questions. Who's the best? The best warrior. So huge transition towards becoming warriors. It's still the same people, and so they're still great at metalworking. But now in particular, that metalworking is going to be targeted at armor and targeted at weapons. And so they're largely credited with being the inventors of chainmail. The Gauls, they came up with chainmail, iron chainmail armor. Now they were a poor people, but great metalworkers. And so when you see the Gauls fighting the Romans, what you're going to notice is the Gauls have better armor and weapons, but only a few of them. So your best Gaul soldier has better equipment than your best Roman soldier. However, your average Roman soldier has better equipment than your average Gaul soldier. So poor, so they don't have as many of these nice armor and weapons as Rome will have, but superior when they do have them. And so the only reason I tried to give you, this is supposed to be like a typical picture of what Gauls might have been like, an amalgam of all sorts of mixtures. So you might have one guy here wearing chain link armor standing right next to a guy who's almost naked. Most of them just being clothed in long-sleeved, long pant-legged clothes covering them as they fight. But huge variety in what you would see from the soldiers. So, their whole society orients towards being warriors. The best man is the best warrior. And their skill with metalworking is retargeted at militaristic purposes. And I'm sure religious purposes and stuff like that as well, but military purposes. And so now, the way that their social structure now works is, looking at this picture, the way that their tribes are going to work is you find some hill, and on that hill you're going to have three tiers. The top of the hill is where the chieftain and his family live. And your chieftain is going to be the family of the best warriors. The head of that family is your chieftain. The warriors dictate everything. Around him is where your warriors are going to live. The best at fighting get to become warriors. And you now get to live off of the labors of the rest of the people. Around them you have your artisans, the people responsible for the metal crafting largely. And then around them you have your farmers. The guesstimation is about 90% of the population farmed. So even though we said they are a very warlike culture, it's more like the culture is targeted towards them becoming warriors. It's not all of them were warriors. It's that everything's designed to prop up your best warriors.
Which is required to sustain them.
Well, I don't know that's required to sustain them. It's the transition that occurs. So maybe it's a transition that occurs amongst a few, and then it becomes a survival thing. If the tribe next to you is elevating their best warriors and organized completely to make themselves have great warriors, you kind of have to do the same thing or be conquered. And if you're conquered, they're going to expand their culture and say, we're setting up a new government style, and let's see who's the best fighter amongst you. He's now the leader. Making stuff up, but you can see how that's how it would go. So Gauls oriented towards war. Not everyone's a warrior. Only about 10% of them are going to be. 90% of them are farmers. Well, not even 10% warriors, because you also have your artisans. but only a minority of them are actually going to be warriors, and the warrior is going to be the best at fighting amongst them. And you want to get ahead in life, son? You don't want to grow up to be a farmer? You got to learn how to fight. It's your only chance. Got to be one of the best. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck farming like me your whole life. So, whole society organized around becoming the best warrior. Now, the government styles, it would be a chiefdom. So, your chief is the head, controlling the local villages, with a sort of feudalism for minor chiefdoms. So if I'm the head chief here and you're the head chief there, but it's clear that my hill's better than your hill, my village is better than your village, and we can take you, you might agree to be subservient to me. And so I might be the head chieftain and have a few minor chieftains who come under me and rule what's understood to be my land in my stead. So a very feudal-like system, where you have the lords have their own lands that they're required to maintain, but in times of war you come under the king or the head chieftain. Make sense? And now on top of that, by the time we've got them coming down, so you'll notice already, just between these two maps, look at what the Etruscan influence and control was in northern Etruria. By the time the Gauls are coming down, they are already pushing the Etruscans well out of the area. And so this is the threat the Etruscans are dealing with to the north, and it's becoming a very serious problem for them. These warlike people from the north, who somehow made it past that impossible mountain range. It's crazy to them that people are coming through that mountain range even. And to see the result of what comes out of the mountain range. So talked about that. Oh, so by the time they're coming down, not only do you have these chiefdoms, but these chiefdoms now start organizing themselves into confederations. And so now you have a confederation of these chiefdoms are what is organizing when they're coming and making contact with the Etruscans. You know roughly what a confederation is versus a federation?
It's a group of federations.
Well, a confederation is a group of political units where participation is completely voluntary. Federation is a group of political units where participation is mandatory. Confederation gets a weird negative connotation just because of the American Civil War. It's because the north side, the states were in a federation. You didn't get to leave. In the south, the states were organized into a confederation. You could come and go as you pleased. So it's a confederation of these chiefdoms coming together, all with one purpose. Let's expand down to those lands in the south. In particular, trade's been going up that way, and they've been finding out there's good stuff down there. The story goes, in particular, wine. That's what they love. That's coming out of Italy, and that's what they want to go down for. Or at least from the Etruscans, and that's some of the motivation towards going into the Etruscan land. Last thing to talk about. The Gauls are massive. Now, on average, they're only 3 to 4 inches taller than the Romans, but understand that's the average. Your average Gaul doesn't get to go and become a warrior. It's going to be your biggest, strongest, best fighters that are going to go on to be the warriors. And so when you're looking at the few that go on to be warriors, understand it's a small portion of the population. Those are in general going to be your much bigger, stronger people, taller people. And so it wouldn't be unusual for them to be like 6 inches taller than the Roman soldier that they're fighting. And a 6-inch difference is absolutely massive in terms of talking about the build of a person. I don't know, how tall are you? Perfect. Would you mind come standing by me for a sec? I'm 5'9". He's 6'3". This is exactly a 6-inch difference. Now imagine he's a Gaul, training his whole life to become the greatest warrior in his city. I'm a guy who farms and fights on the summers. In single combat, that is terrifying. Thanks. And so that is what these Romans and these Etruscans are seeing when they're going to go fight these people. Is, holy crap, they are huge. And it is terrifying. They have been fighting people roughly their same size this whole time. So, very warlike, good metal workers, but pretty simple outside of that, and big. Absolutely terrifying for the Romans, and for Italy as a whole. And so that's the Gauls coming down from the north. That's what's scaring them. We're basically out of time. Can talk just a little bit about why they're so big. The most probable, again, no clue why. I'm just going to give you guesses that I came across. One of them is it just so happens that when you take a species and you spread it across the planet, the portion of that species that lives in colder areas tends to be bigger. Take the same species, spread across the planet, give it a couple hundred years. In the northern areas, they're going to be bigger than they are in the colder areas. They're going to be larger than they are in the warmer areas. And it's a theory that has to do with bigger bodies are better at temperature regulation, using fewer resources to maintain the body temperature, something to that effect, and so they just have a better chance of surviving.
Storing more energy.
So that largely accounts for most of it. Another theory to account for some of it would be the social structure that they have in place. The social structure that they have in place is very much oriented around a warrior type society. The best warrior is the best man. On top of that, they were constantly fighting amongst themselves, and so your male population was dying all the time. Very regular thing to lose a considerable portion of your male population in just fighting other tribes for whatever reason. And so your female to male population is offset that way. And so it's very typical, almost in all early societies, that what's considered your elite men in the society have multiple, I won't say wives, but mating partners. Some cultures, it's like they're all wives. Some cultures, it's like he has a wife, but then he has concubines, and those are different things inside that social structure. Not sure exactly what it would have been here. There's speculations both ways, but. So now your biggest, strongest warriors are also the ones reproducing the most, creating a genetic push that way. So most likely to do with the cold, and possibly likely to do with their social structure as well that they had in place with the emphasis on warriors, making them so shockingly different from people who grew up a mountain range away from them. So that's it for the Gauls. We finished the siege of Veii. I don't know if I want to jump into our next topic with so little time left, so we'll call it there. Any questions you want recorded? Any questions about any of this? Cool. Well, hopefully see you next week.
Should be good next week, but the week after, no.
We'll see. Hopefully.